Do you remember September? Welcome. You're tuned in and listening to Back Talk with Sharona. I am your host. My name is Sharona. We have a big show today. First up, your NFL update. We're going to give you guys a review of what happened in the National Football League throughout the month of September, last day of September. And then we're going to be talking, that's with Aaron Nagler of FanDuel. Very excited to have him. You guys, I'm going to fangirl a little bit because I am such a fan of him, and I'm so excited to have him on the show. I couldn't sleep last night. I was so excited to have him on the show this morning. And then we're going to talk to one of my favorite people in the world, Emory Hunt, Mr. Football Game Plan himself. He's going to get us up to speed on what's been going on in college football. I have to talk to him just a little bit about my Tennessee Volunteers losing heartbreaking loss to the Florida Gators. We'll find out who's on the Heisman watch, what players to watch, what games have been key so far, what games to look for. Then at the 11 o'clock hour, Adam Barlow of the World Women's Sports Show is going to be joining me. We'll talk about what it means to be a football fan in England, how different is that from being a fan in the United States. We'll talk a little bit about the game overseas, the difference between soccer and rugby and things of that nature. And then in our final segment, we're going to talk some NBA and some college hoops with Nick Simmons. You guys know that I'm a big basketball fan, but I'm more a casual fan. Vashti, my co-host on Game Over with Vashti and Sharona, is the NBA expert. She's the college hoops expert. But we're going to talk to Nick Simmons. All I really want to know from Nick is if my Spurs are going to do it again and whether Tim Duncan is the best to ever do it. Now, I know that that's probably not going to be an affirmative answer, but I do want to find out from Nick where he would place Tim Duncan and how they're going to manage his playing time this season. So very excited to talk to him. But first up is Aaron. Thanks so much for joining me, Aaron. I really do appreciate it. Tell everybody out there a little bit about who you are.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really kind of honored to be joining you this morning. I'm up here in New York City, just trying to dodge the raindrops and just getting along with my day.
Well, we saw the first sign that we actually do still have that burning globe in the sky this morning. It's been very rainy, very icky here for several days, so it was quite nice actually to see the sun. And by the way, New York is one of my favorite cities in the entire world. It's been a long time since I've been there, way too long really. I need to get back up there and check it out, but definitely love that city. It's got such a great vibe and so much to do there. And it gets a bad reputation, but every time I've been there, the people have been absolutely fantastic to me.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I remember when I moved up here after I graduated, I remember our dean saying, I know, the reputation that New Yorkers get is sometimes less than glowing, but you will not find a nicer, more helpful group of people. They may be brusque at times, but it's just because they got something to do. I love it here. I've been here 15 years now, and I absolutely love this city.
Oh, yeah? What part of New York do you live in?
I live in Queens in a place called Astoria, which is right across the river from Manhattan.
I know exactly where that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly. It's a great place. Yeah.
I love it.
It really is. It's a city that I like Chicago too. It's got a little different vibe, but
I went to school in Chicago. I love Chicago.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah. Wow. Two of my favorite cities in the world. That's great. Now, Aaron, I know that you're a Packers guy. We're going to start with some Packers talk, and then I want to discuss some of the other kind of big storylines that are sort of fanning around right now in the National Football League. But the first thing I want to start with, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it because I do follow Pro Football Focus. I understand what they do and how you use their stats. But one of the bigger things from yesterday was the negative grade that they gave Aaron Rodgers. So I want to ask you how you view that and the difference between using, stats and analytics versus the eye test.
Well, I know a lot of the guys over there at PFF, and I like them a lot. And I understand what they're doing, and I even understand how they came to the grade that they did. And there is a disconnect there when fans watch the game and they see Aaron throw for 5 touchdowns, and then they, see a grade in what is a negative. So it seems incongruous. And in their defense, they do grade what is done post-snap. Like after the snap of the ball, everything that happens, that's what they grade. Now, obviously, they don't have the coach's tape when they do the grade, and they don't know the play calls. And they, will give you their caveats in those regards and tell you why those two things don't matter. I think they matter a great deal, especially when you're grading a quarterback. That's why I think the whole idea of grading a quarterback without the coach's tape, you can't see the coverage, et cetera. I just think it's kind of folly. But I think this whole episode
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think PFF does a great job in regards to they have tons of really useful factual information. Like they can tell you if let's say like this summer I was doing a piece on Julius Peppers, and I wanted to know how many times he lined up inside over a guard as opposed to outside at his outside linebacker position. And they had that information, where guys lined up, how many times they lined up, how many times quarterbacks threw to this side of the field, that side of the field, how deep was the throw. Those are facts that you can say. It's not subjective. There's no grading involved. I think they do a great job of compiling that information, and it's really super useful. I agree. I've never paid attention to grades for this very reason. And they even admitted in their piece, Aaron Rodgers, what makes him so unique and so such a weapon and so great is everything he does prior to the snap of the football, whether it be his cadence, whether it be his ability to diagnose defenses and get his team into better plays that are going to have a lot more success, things like that can't be graded. So that's kind of the whole episode is kind of proven why I don't pay attention to grades because. And it's funny because it's even funnier when you see Mike McCarthy come out yesterday and say they haven't even graded the tape yet. The Packers, the coaches haven't even graded the tape yet. So, I just I like my boys over there at PFF. I get where they're coming from, but the grades, I don't pay attention.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you just said. One of the things I don't think that there is a quarterback in the league right now that. And I'm a big Peyton Manning fan. I went to school at Tennessee. I don't think that there's a quarterback in the game that reads the field any better than Aaron Rodgers. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think there are guys who, absolutely have done it and can do it at a high level. You mentioned Peyton. I think obviously Tom Brady, Drew Brees can still his mind is still there, even though it would seem that he's kind of taken a step back physically. But yeah, I think Aaron is one of the best. It's hard to say who's the best at something like that because there's so many different factors involved when they're at the line of scrimmage, changing things.
Yeah,
I remember 2 weeks ago everyone was ready to bury Peyton Manning, and then he played just an outstanding game against Detroit. And he did that. That last touchdown is him reading the line of scrimmage. He knew where the blitz was coming from. He audible to a play that. Basically won the game for him. And that's what these guys do, these upper echelon quarterbacks. They're amazing. And Rodgers is obviously one of them, and he's obviously one of the best.
Yeah, I agree with that, too. And, you mentioned Peyton Manning. It really is hard, in my opinion, to compare, guys because every team has their own uniqueness. They run their own systems, and it's hard to compare because each team is different. And they run different things, and so you have to take that into consideration. But since we're talking about Peyton Manning, and you mentioned Julius Peppers, one of the things that I've been talking about this week is what a great Sunday it was for Ole Man football. And Julius Peppers was a guy that I talked about, and Peyton Manning, and there are a lot of other players too. And that I always love to see that. Charles Woodson, with his great defensive play. I love to see the old man still getting it done out there.
Yeah, it's funny, too, because, Woodson, he's 38, 39 now? That's just incredible.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Well,
it's funny, though.
Peyton are the same age. Yeah.
I know. Well, it's funny, though, because, you expect these guys to look better in September than they will in December. You know what I mean? Like, everyone always talks about, especially when it comes to free agency, and they have, aging vets who switch teams, and they start out, the first, week 3, week 4, they look great. They look like they've, better than they ever have, best shape of their life, et cetera, et cetera. Well, yeah, the vets always do. They get like preferential treatment during camp. They get Veterans Day off. They get a lighter practice load, and they look great in September. But it's always different once you get to December, and that grind of the season comes down. Those young pups, maybe a little bit less experience, but they got the legs. They got the pep in their step, so to speak. And those old guys, you see some of that fire go out. I think last year a perfect example of that is Larry Foote, the Arizona Cardinals linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had written him off. He had come from Pittsburgh, and everyone said he's dead, he's done, his legs are gone. And the first month of the season, he looked reborn in Arizona. He looked absolutely outstanding. And then by December, he was a complete shell of the guy you saw tearing it up early in the season. So I think, it's great to watch these guys. I love Charles Woodson. Obviously, he's one of my favorite players of all time.
Yeah, me too.
But it is always interesting to see what happens over the course of the year.
I was such an anomaly. I was one of the few Tennessee Volunteer fans who did not completely freak out and lose my mind when he won the Heisman over Peyton Manning. I mean, what he did. Right. I mean, I understand, right? And quarterbacks get a lot of the glory, but what Charles Woodson did in college was incredible. It was a tough decision, and I understand why people thought that Peyton got shafted, but they've both been excellent players, and they're both going to be Hall of Fame guys.
Absolutely. Charles Woodson's one of the greatest players I've ever seen play the game. I mean, he's absolutely incredible.
He really is. Before we move away from the Packers and go to the rest of the NFL, I have to ask you, the tight end situation is looking a little iffy. Corliss is going to be out for a month. I think I saw this morning.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Rodgers, young, very exciting tight end. Devontae Adams is a little dinged up. For the younger guys, the Rodgers, the tight end, is what I'm talking about, the Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Who, if you're a fantasy football player, who do you want to key in on right now? I own a lot of Devontae Adams, but he's dinged up. He's underperformed. Ty Montgomery was getting his shot on Sunday. And then you've got Jeff Janis, who a lot of people like. Who do you think that, if you're a connoisseur of the game and play fantasy football, who are the younger guys that you think we should be looking at?
Well, I think you definitely want to grab Ty Montgomery. I think he's going to take this opportunity and just absolutely run away with it. I think, with Adams, I've heard a couple of people say, he's been a disappointment, so to speak. It's just kind of the flow of the offense, and because they got James Jones and, Rodgers is obviously super comfortable with him, the stuff you're seeing with Jones on the free plays, that would have been Adams if they wouldn't have gotten Jones. Mm-hmm. But because they did, it kind of, bumped Adams down the pecking order, so to speak, and now he's injured. He re-aggravated the ankle injury. But I think Ty Montgomery, he has come in there and he's played outstanding. I mean, I know there were
I'm
lots
a big
of
fan of him.
I mean, if people forget, because he had a rough senior year. There's no doubt about that, and you can't deny that. But if you go back to his junior tape, he was outstanding. I mean, he was a man among boys. And I think he's kind of found that again. I think, obviously he's playing with the best quarterback in the league. That obviously helps. But you've got to be on point when you're in this offense. You've got to know the adjustments. You've got to know the routes. And he's come in and they haven't missed a beat with him in there. So I think that bodes well for the future. Jeff Janis, he's got a ton of talent. He's got a ton of athletic ability. He struggles with the little things. I mean, you even saw on Monday night, Rodgers had to yell at him to get set. And then he ran I love that Rodgers went right to him. His first play in the game, Rodgers went to him on a fly route. But Janis runs it up the sideline and goes out of bounds. I mean, you got to give your quarterback a chance. And then, he's just not Simon sure. So I would stay away from Janis. I think he's a really big tease. I mean, he's a guy who every preseason you see him running, a 9 route, catching touchdowns, and everyone gets all excited. But then when he gets to the regular season and things are 10 times more complicated, he for whatever reason, Rodgers and he are just never on the same page. And Rodgers has been very vocal about that. But Montgomery,
you mentioned James.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned James Jones. I should have mentioned him when I was talking about old man football. And, initially I was like, right? I mean, like I was like, there's no way I'm going to pick James Jones up. I'm going to ride. I've got. I was able to snag Ty Montgomery in some best ball leagues. I've got a lot of Devontae Adams. I even have Richard Rodgers at tight end. I've got him stashed. And I was like, I'm just not going to do James Jones. And then that first game, you're like, holy cow, he looks like a different player.
Hey,
he looks like a different player. How can he be so different from what we saw in preseason with the Giants and then with the Raiders last season?
I know. Well, and people forget though he led the Raiders in receiving last year. It's kind of funny because now Amari Cooper's there and everyone's obviously got to go over him because he's great. But it's not like Jones kind of disappeared last year. It's just you get a rookie quarterback and they were always behind and they were throwing it a lot, and so he had a lot of opportunities and he caught a bunch of touchdowns. But it's funny, everyone thought he kind of just fell off the face of the earth. He was still really talented, and I'll never understand why Reggie McKenzie lets him go, but then goes and signs Michael Crabtree. Like, I want to go young, but I'm going to go sign Michael Crabtree. Like, I just don't understand that. But
I didn't understand that.
It's the Packers game, so I'll take it,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He is obviously he's comfortable with Aaron Rodgers and really tearing it up. And I was fortunate I didn't. It's so weird. I'm very, very new to auction leagues. I did an auction for the first time I think 2 years ago, and this year I really did get into it. And like I said, I'm doing a lot of best ball leagues. After the first game in one of my auction leagues, I was like, I've got to go. Pick up James Jones, and so you really don't know what to bid because it's blind bidding in this particular league, and I bid what I thought was a pretty fair amount. I didn't win him, unfortunately. I was able to pick him up in some other leagues, fortunately, but it is pretty interesting how that does work. I can talk about the Packers all day long, and I know your time is valuable, so let's go ahead and move. Yeah, I love it. I just, they're so fun to watch. And I really do think that this is their year. We're going to be talking about who you think are the best teams in the NFC and the AFC. But I do think that, and I'll tell you what, we didn't even talk about this too. I was very impressed with the Packers defense on Monday night.
Yeah, I mean, I know everyone was very concerned about Jamal Charles, and it's clear that the Packers coaches were as well. If you watch the coaches tape, you see, I mean, they basically dared Alex Smith to win that game, especially early on in the first half. They crowded the line. They had a safety in the box almost every. I mean, it's not hyperbole to say almost every single snap. And Quentin Dix. Traditionally, when they go to their single high look, he's about 15 yards off the line of scrimmage. He was hovering around 10 yards off the line of scrimmage on nearly every play because they just weren't afraid of Kansas City going deep. They know, everyone knows, that's their game. It's a horizontal game trying to get guys in space. And the Packers, we're not going to let Jamal Charles beat us. Alex Smith, you're going to have to do it. And he couldn't. And, I think it's especially impressive when, they're still shuffling so many guys in and out due to injuries. The Troy Guion suspension, that his last game suspension was Monday night, and it didn't matter. It doesn't matter who they get. They put in Joe Thomas, who they signed off the Dallas practice squad last year, or last week. Obviously, a guy that they've had in camp the last 2 summers, but they signed him off Dallas's practice squad. They had him out there as the dime linebacker, and so they could kick Clay Matthews back to the outside and have him rush the passer. I mean, it was I thought it was a really impressive job on their part.
I thought it was too. Dom Capers gets a lot of heat, and well deserved. Some of it is completely deserved.
Absolutely, some of it is most certainly deserved. There's no doubt.
But I did think it was a great game plan. Are the Packers the best team in the NFC right now?
I think they're right there with the Cardinals. I think a lot of it obviously depends on the health of the quarterback for both teams. I mean, we saw last year when Aaron kind of, was kind of limping through the last months of the season in the playoffs. It makes a big difference. And then obviously 2 years ago when he missed 8 games, they still missed the playoffs. But they're a very different team. And we saw, of course, the implosion in Arizona last year when Carson Palmer went down. But,
yeah.
I think if those two quarterbacks stay healthy, I think that's your NFC Championship game right there.
It's so important to have a good backup quarterback. The problem that we're seeing right now in the league, and time's not going to permit us to really discuss this. I hope you'll come back and we can discuss it. But, there is a decided lack of NFL caliber quarterback play right now. And so, you've got guys starting for teams that, if the talent was there, they would probably be a backup.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because there's always been, ever since, I can show you Sports Illustrated episode or issues from like the 70s that were, with huge exposés about the future of the game and where is the quarterback position going. And that's kind of on, it's a cyclical thing. And, we had a great quarterback class in 83 that people still talk about, Jim Kelly and Dan Marino, et cetera. It goes in waves. And right now we're about to have a big shift where we go from these guys, Manning, Brady, Breeze, in a couple of 5-6 years, Rodgers will be in that conversation as far as, and then we're going to be shifting to guys like Andrew Luck and Russell Wilson and Cam Newton, and even these now younger guys, Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. It's just the way the league works. More than anything, more than ever, this is a quarterback league. You've got to have a quarterback or you can't win. It's as simple as that. And that's why you see teams like Chicago pay Jay Cutler $18 million a year because they're just scared to death of not having someone who can operate the offense. And look no further than what happened up in Seattle where they punted on every possession because they didn't have a quarterback. Jimmy Clausen, and that's kind of on them. I understand there's a dearth of quarterbacks, but how you ever thought you could get through an NFL game with Jimmy Clausen at quarterback is beyond me.
It's crazy. I know.
The whole point is to have someone in there who can at least come in and operate your system, and he's just not an NFL quarterback in any way, shape, or form. So, this is what the NFL is. People are scared to death of not having a quarterback, and when you have a quarterback, you have to make sure that you're always looking for the next quarterback.
And speaking of which, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Ben Roethlisberger being out.
Very much so.
And Michael Vick, we talked about him last night. Michael Vick has not been impressive in a long, long time, and I think we're getting ready to see exactly how good Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown really are.
Yeah, there's no question how good Antonio Brown is. He's amazing. And Le'Veon Bell is a true talent. And they're going to try and, obviously try and get those guys in space, isolate them and let their athleticism take over. The whole thing with Vic is the taking care of the football or the lack thereof. Their defense is not good enough to be able to withstand a barrage of turnovers. And I think it was the very first snap Vic was in on versus St. Louis. He fumbled the ball. Now, they got it back, but that's who he is. It's always been that way. And I think so many people kind of still expect the electric Michael Vick to show up, the guy who we've seen run around, defenses and make him look silly. That guy's long gone. That is not that guy anymore. And just operating within that offense, I think, they'll hit the occasional big play, but I really worry about the turnovers, and that's it. And I don't think they can survive that. So if they can stay at 500 while Ben is out, they've got a shot. But it's dubious at best.
Yeah, I agree. Are the Packers? Are the Patriots the best team in AFC right now?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's any question there. I think that it's funny because I think people get so sick of the Patriots and the Broncos, but they're right there. They're two really good teams.
They are.
It's funny because I think we expected this with the Patriots. We expected them to come out and just guns a-blazing, revenge tour for Tom Brady, etc. So what's happening there isn't a surprise. Although I think they're being helped a lot because they're scoring so many points that their defense hasn't really had to win a game for them. I do think that their defense is still susceptible, especially kind of in the secondary, if and when they kind of face some higher octane offenses. But their offense is so good that it just doesn't or hasn't mattered. But with Denver, it's funny. I think I've seen people saying / suggesting that Denver is quote unquote struggling, and I don't think they're struggling at all. I think they are, they're obviously had some hiccups on offense. They seem to have kind of ironed that out a little bit against Detroit on Sunday night. But I just think we're not used to watching a Denver team that is stronger on the defensive side of the ball than it is on offense. And they're winning with that defense. They're winning with a smothering defense. And that's something we're not used to. We don't equate that with Denver like we haven't in such a long time. I mean, since the Orange Crush, for goodness sake. And I'm dating myself there. But, that's a really good football team. And I think people who, like I said, I think people who say they're, quote, struggling are just not used to seeing them win with defense, which is what I think they're doing.
It's a different football team. It definitely is. I completely agree with that. And speaking of old man football, DeMarcus Ware just looks incredible right now.
He does.
Of course, you wonder, is he going to be able to keep it up? But I agree that defense
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. I mean, the same thing happened last year. Remember, at the beginning of the year, he was getting up to quarterbacks, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's like he went back 5 years." And then what happens in the playoffs against Andrew Luck? They couldn't get to. They couldn't.
Oh, yeah.
And the Colts don't have a very good offensive line, and neither Von Miller or DeMarcus Ware could get to Luck in January. I'm telling you that it's one thing to do it in September, but come December and January, it is a young man's game.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to see whether they're able to manage, snaps and keep those guys fresh and healthy. Be very interesting to see how they do. I'm not going to be able to hit on everything that we wanted to talk about, but I do want to ask you, the fire sale has started in Chicago with the trade of Bostic and Jared Allen. Will we see any more? There's some talk about Matt Forte being moved. And do we the trade deadline is about a month away. Do you think we'll see any blockbuster trades this year?
I mean, you never know. I mean, it's the NFL. Things happen and we go crazy. That's why we love it. It's like the greatest reality show going.
It is.
I still tend to doubt there'll be any big trades. I think maybe one or two. In regards to Forte, I think, we've seen reports that, people are sniffing around, and I'm not surprised because he's a really talented back. His contract's all paid up, so you get him for kind of a free trial run, so to speak, for the rest of this year. I just don't, I know teams, like I saw, who was it, Denver and Baltimore linked to being possible good destinations for him, but then all I think is, does he play offensive line in Dallas? Because that's what they need. Like, they've got backs. I just don't see a team giving up much for a back pushing, kind of the wrong side of 30 and a ton of mileage on him. It's just, I tend to think most NFL GMs would stay away from that, but you never know. I mean, probably ends up Ryan Grigson will give up 2/3 in the first tomorrow when we wake up. So I don't know. All it takes is one guy who's in his mind, and then we all go nuts, like I said. But, I don't know. It's really interesting. That whole Bears scenario is really interesting to me, how they got to week 3 and decided all of their planning from the offseason was flushed down the toilet, and now they're on to 2016. It's kind of baffling to me.
Yeah, there's been some talk that maybe they're looking to upgrade possibly go in a different direction at the quarterback position. There's going to be we'll be talking with Emory Hunt here in a few minutes about some of the exciting young talent. And
tell him I say hi. I love Emory. Tell him I say hello. I love Emory.
I definitely will. We've got to talk about FanDuel. By the way, congratulations on making that move. I think FanDuel is absolutely about. They're already the biggest name, in the business, and I think they're absolutely about to explode. Talk a little bit to our audience about FanDuel and the daily DFS experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's funny because I am very new to the entire daily fantasy gig, and it's something that I had kind of read about a little bit, like maybe last year. Didn't know a lot about it, and then this summer I got really intrigued by it. And it just so happens FanDuel approached me as I was kind of getting into it, so it was kind of a perfect timing, right place, right time thing. It's a ton of fun. I mean, I just know that, the idea of fantasy football, people love fantasy football. You were talking about auction drafts earlier, or, just the whole idea of fantasy football is so much fun. I've been doing it for so long now. But the idea that you can draft your team and then one or two injuries and one or two early losses in the season, and then all of a sudden you're staring down the barrel of, okay, I've got a whole year left, like I've got 3 months left of hopelessness, basically. So many people, you get to week 5 or 6, and it's like, well, maybe next year, with the team that you drafted, like either you had a bad draft or you had bad luck with injuries, etc. You don't have to worry about any of that with daily fantasy. On FanDuel, every time, every week, pick your lineup. You have a $60,000, salary cap, and every guy, you can have anyone you want, and obviously they have a salary, so you have to put together your team every week, and it's just tons of fun because you're not dealing with injuries. Because if they're injured, they're not available, so you don't worry about all that. And and every week you get a new shot, and you can play for money. Obviously, lots of people play for money. I just like to kind of play against my buddies. You can do what are called head-to-head games where I literally play with 3 buddies around the country every week. We just go head-to-head, and we just do it for bragging rights, and it's a lot of fun. So as someone who, like I said, I'm obsessed with football, so I'm going to be watching football anyway. It's just another level of, this is a good, fun kind of competition that I can have with my friends. Like I said, you can take it as seriously or as non-seriously as you want in regards to putting down money, but I just have a great time with it.
Yeah, I've been playing fantasy football since 2005, and it is absolutely some of the best fun that I've ever had, and I completely agree. It's always, I'm new to best ball leagues, by the way, and I really do like those because they're so less time consuming. You draft your team. Of course, I did have Kelvin Benjamin in one and Jordy Nelson in another. Those those losses very hard. But
there you go.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining me. Tell everybody out there where they can find you on social media. And are you working on anything right now?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Aaron Nagler. It's just my name, all one word. And right now, I'm producing videos for FanDuel, and I have my live show tonight for CheeseheadTV.com, my Packers site. Check it out. We're live every Wednesday. We have Packers starting center Corey Lindsley is joining us on the show tonight, so it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah,
awesome.
I love Corey.
Thanks again for joining me. Yeah, have
Absolutely.
a great day.
Thank you too. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Emory Hunt is going to join us. We'll talk some college football, get your Heisman candidates, and talk about maybe some of the talent out there that you should be paying attention to. The draft is not too far away. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. All right, good morning and welcome back. You're tuned in and listening to Bat Talk with Sharona. I'm your host. My name is Sharona. Shout out to Aaron Nagler for joining me in that first segment. Great stuff. Super excited to talk to him. One of my favorites. I followed him on Twitter for a long, long time. Great football mind. If you're not following him, what are you doing with your life? But now we're joined by one of my favorite people in the entire world. I love to talk football with Emory Hunt. He is one of the best football minds out there, and so I'm still very honored to have him this morning. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Sharona. I really appreciate that.
I hooked you up. Did you like it, the music?
Hey, you know what? That's the smoothest intro that a person could ask for.
Well, thanks for giving me a heads up on what you like, because I always struggle with that. That's one of the things that I pride myself on is getting great walkout music for people. So I wanted to get it right for you. Tell everybody out there who you are, and of course I know who you are, and you've got 2 books out, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we started Football Game Plan back in 2007, and what we do is we break it down from the NFL all the way down to women's tackle football and international football. So we cover it from soup to nuts. And the 2 books that we have out right now, one is Football, A Love Story, and the other is What Did Football Teach Me? We've interviewed over 100 current and former coaches, players, analysts, executives, entertainers across the board about what they love about the game, what keeps them involved, what the game taught them, and why they find it hard to leave the game alone. And I just think it's a two great reads for everyone. And for me, I use it as therapy almost. It was great to put these books together and interview all these people because you got some real great stories. And it's funny because no matter where you come from or how different you think you may be, we all share the same type of reason for being involved in this game and not wanting to leave this game alone, and realize how important it is for everyone to understand that this is a game that really can help you.
Yeah, I was reading through the list of the guys that you interviewed. Ross Tucker's on there. Mike Singletary is on there. It's really a who's who in football.
Yeah, we worked on this book. We started working on it January 2015, and we finished it, all the interviews and transcribing, in June. So we were really, we were across the board in securing these interviews and talking to people.
Oh, by the way, I should tell you before I forget. Aaron says hi. He says you're one of his favorite people.
You know what? Aaron's a good guy, and not only is a good football guy, but he's a good movie buff too. And we met a couple years ago, and in passing and talked football, obviously, but we went toe to toe with some old movies. We both like old movies, and he's a real good movie buff. He's a good guy.
What's your favorite movie in the entire thing?
Wow.
I know that's a hard question.
Wow. Okay, let me see. One movie that I thought really impacted me and really just stuck with me for a long time, and I thought it was well produced. It was What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. I thought that was a great movie.
Yeah.
Robin
Williams, he was fantastic. Was really, really sad when that situation happened, and he has been in so many great movies. The Birdcage is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love that movie, and I thought that he was absolutely brilliant in it. We talk a lot about action movies on this show. I like cheesy movies. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Roadhouse is absolutely one of my favorite movies, just to sit and watch, and have fun. They're remaking it, by the way. I'm a little bit scared about that, but I guess we'll see. Well, let's go ahead and talk about some college football. Very, very disappointing loss. We talked about this on Monday. My Tennessee Volunteers were widely expected to beat Florida, but they were not able to pull that out. Did you happen to catch any of that game?
I'm sorry, you broke up. You said the Tennessee Titans? Or I'm sorry.
No, the Tennessee Volunteers, they were widely expected to beat the Florida Gators this past weekend. They were not able to seal that win. Did you catch any of that football game? Yeah,
and it was unfortunate is that, they played out. I thought they played 3 different games in that one game versus Florida, and it was impressive that they showed mettle and they were able to take the lead late, but you have to finish. I think that right there is just the biggest cloud around Butch Jones's tenure at Tennessee. It's just that you got to be able to finish these games. They're talented enough to win, but they got to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the knocks on Butch Jones and something that I think he's going to have to do a little bit better with is he plays not to lose instead of playing to win. And, they've got a lot of talent. They really need to trust their players. They're not letting Josh Dobbs throw like I think that they should. Now, he's a little erratic at times, but he's not going to get better unless you just let him play.
Right. You got to coach to your guys' strength. I think that's where, you mentioned it, that's where they're not having success. They have talented running backs. They have talented receivers. But you have to make sure you're getting the most out of what you have at all positions. And like you mentioned, I don't think they're getting the most out of Josh Dobbs.
Yeah, no, I don't. I completely agree with that. You think I've said this, and looking like I may be right. Is the SEC entering somewhat of a down period right now?
I think it's still one of the tougher conferences because of how they play. It's a lot of it is about trench warfare. So your offensive lines and defensive lines have to be on point, and that I think you don't see that anywhere else but the SEC, which is why they give a lot of teams problems. So I just think there's more of a shift on who's the top team, so to speak. I think that's where it's going. Normally we've seen Alabama on one side, and we've seen, the East seems to rotate between Georgia, South Carolina, or even Florida. So I just think right now we're seeing a shift in who's the top team and who's becoming that premier team, that consistent premier team in the SEC.
Is Ole Miss the best team in the SEC right now?
You know what? I don't think so. And this is going to surprise you. It will be a team in the West, though. I just think LSU is the best team in the SEC right now.
Okay.
But when I looked at LSU, they can't stop. Last year, I want to say maybe late last year, they finally were able to stop the run because they put the right linebacker in the game and Kendall Beckwith. And now you look at what they have at their disposal, 3 talented wide receivers. They have the best running back, arguably, in the nation. They have a quarterback that I think that plays just like Joshua Dobbs over at Tennessee, but he's in an offense where they're not throwing the football, and I think defensively they've gotten a lot better. So as the passing game starts to come alive to match with what they do right now in the running game, LSU is real dangerous.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk that Fournette should sit. Do you agree with that or not?
There's a lot of talk. I'm sorry?
That Fournette should sit and, preserve his, it's sort of like the Jadeveon Clowney argument that, he can't go to the league just yet, so, don't get hurt, don't get injured. What do you think about that?
I don't like it at all because you don't get better by not playing. And it's going to be tough for a guy to stay in football shape without playing football. I mean, basketball is different. You can go and shoot in the gym. You can go and put yourself through workout drills because basketball is a lot about cardio, and stuff like that, and shooting your technique. Baseball's the same way. Football, people forget that football has the physical component, the hitting component to it. And if you're not in equipment, you're not wearing those pads, you're not falling down, you're not taking those hits, you're not meshing your mental reps with your physical reps, you're not football ready. And so, I don't think you can get football ready without playing football. So I think the NFL has it right as far as age is concerned because that allows you to catch up physically. And yes, the Fournette may be 21 by the time he's in by January. But even when you watch his game, just from a scouting standpoint, there are some holes in his game. And a lot of people wanted to ignore last week, that game in Syracuse. I mean, he ran through 2 gaping holes for 2 long runs. One was on a busted play, and one was just right down the middle with the hole parted like the Red Sea. So if we're being honest in our evaluation, there are some issues in his game. He takes too many shots. I just don't think right now, mentally, from what you're learning as a young college athlete, you're mentally ready for the NFL. Physically, you're not even ready, but mentally, you're not ready yet. So, he should definitely continue to play ball, block out all that outside noise, and just keep focused on the task at hand because he's getting better. He got better over his freshman season, and he's definitely going to get better next year too.
Yeah, I agree with that. We were talking about the difference between football shape and physical shape, and whether the different rules for training camp and OTAs and whatnot are part of the reason why we're seeing what seems to be an increase in injuries in the National Football League. What do you think about that?
I think that combined with the fact that, the equipment has changed and a lot more guys are taking more supplements that we don't know the full long-term effects of. And, I just think all of those things play into the injury, factor. And you mentioned it, too, with guys now overtraining. You don't see people resting. Everyone, because if you're resting now, they look at you like you're not serious about the game. So guys are overextending their bodies. We're seeing more ACL injuries, I think. We're seeing more Achilles injuries. We're seeing more guys pull pectoral muscles and all kind of craziness that I think just from the overtraining, from the supplements, and from the equipment. I think the equipment has gotten lighter so that now you have everybody that's bigger, stronger, faster crashing into each other, don't really have the protection, and so they're getting hurt.
I had a chance to have Ralph Cindric on the show been about a couple of weeks ago, former NFL player, former college player, agent, lawyer, and just all around fantastic guy. And he was saying that he thinks that they should remove the face mask. What do you think about that?
I think that's nonsense, because there's a reason why you put the face mask in place in the first place. You know, guys are getting, not purposely, just accidentally getting hit in the face. I mean, I could see if we didn't have face masks before, we always operated football with face masks, but we've seen what happens when you don't have face masks, which led us to bring in face masks. I don't think that, going back to what didn't work. I just think that, that's a wild theory. I don't agree with that at all.
What do you think? Let's go ahead and turn back to college football. What do you think have been the best games of the season so far, and what games are you most looking forward to in the upcoming month or so?
Well, I think, obviously you had Tennessee, Oklahoma was a good one. Bama, Ole Miss was a real entertaining one. And last week I was at Penn Villanova game, which was interesting because Penn got the victory, and it was the first time they beat Villanova since 1911. So that was an interesting game.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
First time in over 100 years they knocked off a crosstown rival. So those are the games that I think have been exciting this year, and the games I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, we got a game this week that's going to be great. I think two of arguably the better teams in the country, in Clemson and Notre Dame. I think that's going to be a hell of a game. I'm excited.
I love to watch Clemson. I love to watch Clemson play. They're one of my favorite college teams to watch. Just, I don't call myself a fan. I just think I like the way they play football. Right.
It's just a fun brand to watch. And, Notre Dame is a fun brand to watch as well, too, especially with Brian Kelly back there, with that offense that they're running. So this is, one, it'll be an entertaining game. And, two, you got a lot of great talent on the field. It's going to be I wish I could see these two teams play again, in a bowl game or a playoff game, because they are fun to watch.
Yeah. What do you think are the best teams in the country right now?
I think you have to say Ohio State. Even with their inconsistency, they're a really strong football team. They can beat you a multitude of ways. Clemson, Notre Dame. I think those three are the best teams right now in the country. I just think right now, and it's sad that one of those teams will knock each other out, Clemson and Notre Dame. But I think those are the best three teams, in my opinion, in the country.
Yeah. Ohio State. It's going to be interesting to see if they can repeat. Definitely an interesting team to watch. Who's on your Heisman watch, and what players are you scouting right now? What guys do you think are of interest to our audience out there?
Well, you look at, Fournette is obviously a Heisman candidate. The way Jared Goff has thrown the football and put up numbers against, Grambling and schools like that, he's definitely in the mix. Nick Chubb. Trayvon Boykin is another player that has put up some video game type numbers, and I'll throw in an underrated guy that is about to break a record pretty soon here, and Keenan Reynolds, the quarterback for Navy. He's 4 touchdowns. Yeah, he's 4 touchdowns away from breaking Monty Ball's all-time NCAA rushing touchdown record. So that's a so I think, especially with the way Navy is playing right now, I think they're the best team in the American Conference. Their first year in the conference, they may flirt and go undefeated. So I know they got Notre Dame on the schedule, but that's a team that has always beaten Notre Dame and has given Notre Dame problems. So I would say Navy quarterback Keenan Reynolds will be an underrated guy to keep an eye on for the Heisman.
You mentioned Monty Ball. I'm still so disappointed in, right, I think he's still a free agent right now, how his NFL career has gone.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, I think his fate was sealed when they signed Peyton Manning, because that tells you right then and there that they're not going to run the football. And so you have to be one of those guys that doesn't need, volume carries to get into a groove. You have to be one of those jump start type running backs, and that's not his style. And it's unfortunate that people are going to look at him and say, okay, well, I'm not going to draft a running back from Wisconsin, or well, he's a bust. No, he just didn't get the carries. Just like people thought Mark Ingram was a bust when he wasn't even getting the ball in Sean Payton's offense, and when they started to give him consistent carries, he has proven to be what he was at Alabama. So I just think Monty Ball was in a bad situation once he signed Peyton Manning.
Yeah, they say he's a little undersized too, and I don't know, maybe he'll get picked up. It's still, we're only, getting ready to hit week 4. As we've seen in the past, the NFL is rough. It's hard on running backs, and unfortunately, injuries are a part of the game. It's way, way, way early, but what names out there are going to be big in the upcoming 2016 NFL draft?
I think Cordell Jones is still a really good pro prospect. I mean, he can do everything that you want from a throwing standpoint. So I would say he's still in the mix. You also look at the running back position. I think there's going to be a bevy of talent out there in the backfield. And I think one guy I love throwing out, underrated guys to watch. And because I tend to have a broader scope of college football from the coverage that we provide. So I would say, a guy out in San Jose, San Jose State, the running back, Taylor Irvin. He's an outstanding tailback. I think he ran for 300 yards last week versus Fresno State. He has blinding speed. But premier prospects, I would say you're going to have your quarterback. So I would say Cordell Jones. I look at Joey Bosa from Ohio State as well. Vernon Hargreaves, the corner out of Florida. Miles Jack, even when he comes back healthy, I think he's going to probably turn pro. He's a really good linebacker. So I think you're going to have a really good, every year people want to say, well, this is a down year, next year is going to be a down year, or next year is going to be better. I think every year is the same. You just got to find where the talent is. But there's a lot of premier talent, I think, in this draft class, if some juniors declare. But even if you have some seniors, it's a really good crop of guys, each and every year coming out in college football.
Yeah, I want to do a show where we just talk about small school talent, because I do think that those guys are so fun to pull for, and they're fun to watch because the smaller conferences, those teams, they'll mix it up and they'll get out there and do things that maybe your big time schools won't. So it's always fun. But I want to ask you, since we talked about Tennessee a little bit. Butch Jones is known for his recruiting. We talked about Josh Dobbs. We didn't really talk about Jalen Hurd. But does Tennessee, do you see NFL caliber talent on that roster?
Absolutely, and it's unfortunate that Kurt Magid missed the beginning part of the season. But when he's out there, I think he's a true difference maker. I was going to spotlight him in the preseason. I posted a vine of him exploding off the football. He has that elite athleticism, but he can't stay healthy, and that's been his bugaboo the whole time in Knoxville. So
it really has been.
He has been hurt, and that's just tough to say. I mean, tough to see. And you got Brian Randolph, the free safety. Marquez North, I think, is a really good talent. And I'm a big fan of Pig Howard as well, too. So I think they have talent.
Yeah.
And Josh, obviously, if he decides to come out, if he doesn't, but he's a talent. So there's pro talent on that roster.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned North. Well, there's some really nice wide receiver talent on that Tennessee Volunteer football team. Unfortunately, they're just twiddling their thumbs because Tennessee doesn't throw the football, and it is really maddening. I don't know why a wide receiver would go to that school now.
Well, you can say the same thing about LSU. Like, you look at LSU's team, look at the guys in the league from Ruben Randall to Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Like, how did LSU lose a game? With those guys at receiver. But coaching can help you lose games when they don't get those guys to football.
Yeah, it definitely can. I want to talk about officiating before we let you get out of here. Did Texas get screwed or not?
I think so, but at the end of the day, you can't allow and coaches tell you this as players, don't put it on the refs, and don't put yourself in that position to where you're depending on the ref to make or break the call. So Texas shouldn't be in that position, to where the ref would have a hand in the outcome of the game. They got to play better. And Coach Strong definitely knows that, and I do think they got screwed, though, but I also say they have to play better early on, so that way the game is not in doubt and hanging in the balance based off a ref's call.
Texas is a really interesting school right now. They've been through a lot. There's some talk that Charlie Strong might be on the hot seat already. Do you think that he is? And what other coaches do you think are on the hot seat right now?
Man, it's tough because when you look at, and it's unfortunate because because of the situation he's in and how he entered that situation where people didn't want him there, certain people didn't want him there, so he's always going to, he has to go undefeated. He has to go undefeated, unscored upon, and no yards should be gained against Texas in order for him to keep his job, his contract. And that's unfortunate that, some people will view that way because he's a really good coach. You got to give him time to, turn around that program. But other guys, and it's tough to say because I think he's a tremendous coach and recruiter. Mike London out there at Virginia is probably on the hot seat. Kyle Flood at Rutgers, obviously, for what's going down this past season at Rutgers. And an interesting one, I know they just hired him 2 years ago, but they hired him because of his winning pedigree. And I think right now, losing to FCS schools and winless right now at the start of the season, 0-4, I look at Craig Boyle out there in Wyoming. He's coming from North Dakota State. They won 3 straight championships. They thought they were getting a guy that's going to turn their program around. And prior to him getting to Wyoming, they were coming off a bowl game. They were coming off maybe some 5-7 to 7-5 type seasons. They weren't really terrible, but they weren't really good. They needed someone to get them over the hump. They thought Bowl was that guy, and they looked out of sync last year. And you can say, okay, well, they lost Brett Smith. He left early. I get that. But this season they're 0-4 with the loss at North Dakota. I think, he may be on the hot seat as well, even though they brought him in because of that pedigree.
Yeah, that is a sort of sad situation. I agree with that. The Charlie Strong situation does have so many layers, and I'm such a fan. I definitely wanted Tennessee to go after him. He went to Texas and all of that. If some of these guys we're talking about, if they did lose their jobs, who are some of the young coaches in waiting that you think teams might be looking at?
Oh, that's a great question because you wonder if, first of all, they shouldn't got rid of Fulmer. But let's say if they want to go a different route, I'm talking about Tennessee, I'm sorry, but Texas, right. I think if they want to, I would say you look at maybe a Major Applewhite. I think to keep the fan base, invigorated, you want to get guys that have that name. And you thought Charlie Strong would be that guy, but obviously he's not a quote-unquote Texas guy. So I think you have to look at, along the lines of who are the Texas guys that they can bring in. And the only one that jumps out clearly to me is Major Applewhite.
Yeah. I think for Tennessee, and you mentioned Coach Fulmer, who, I adore and obviously did so many great things for Tennessee. Where Tennessee messed up, in my opinion, was back when Mike Hamilton was still the athletic director, and they were looking to replace Lane Kiffin after that first season, and they almost had David Cutcliffe back in the fold. They almost had him under contract, and they completely messed that up and bungled it in the worst way possible, so much so that he flat out turned them down and said he wasn't even interested when they went, when they had their last coaching search. Do you think that David Cutcliffe might become, he's doing a great job at Duke, is he going to be possibly a hot coaching candidate?
He's always a hot coaching candidate because of what he can do with, the most important position, the quarterback position, and an offense. I mean, he turned Ole Miss around and made Ole Miss relevant. And Duke is out here competing for bowl games and ACC championships, so he is definitely one that you would have to look at really long and hard, like, hey, we may need to, see what it takes, open up the Brinks trucks to get him to Tennessee. And Tennessee is still able to get, top talent, even with him, even with the coaching situation that they've had the last two regimes, Kiffin and Butch Jones, the talent is there. And so they just need someone to funnel that talent in the right direction.
Well, they're not going to fire Butch Jones. I'm not calling for Butch Jones to be fired. I do think that Butch Jones needs to get better at X's and O's, and, he just signed a contract extension. So I think that he'd save this season most definitely and probably next season as well. So, because they're paying, I don't know how much they're paying in buyout right now, but it's pretty bad, considering their situation. So, we'll maybe be having this conversation again next year. We'll see. Emory, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time and look forward to talking to you again tonight.
Same. You know what? You got me 2 times today, so absolutely.
I know. You're going to be sick of me before it's over with. Before you get out of here, tell everybody where they can find you on social media. And are you writing another book? When's your next book coming out?
Well, we are working on a series of scouting books, to help, like by position. So we got those in the works. But they can follow me on Twitter at FBallGamePlan and all of my social media outlets like Vine, Instagram, Facebook. It's all Football Game Plan. And subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/footballgameplan.
All right. Thanks again. Have a great day. Talk to you later on tonight.
Thank you so much, Sharona.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. Before we get there, I even made myself a note, and I forgot. Meant to remind you guys once again of our partnership with Ultimate Sports Talk. You can also catch our shows over on ultimatesportstalk.com. Very happy to partner up with them, and they're a great source for sports news and podcasting and things of that nature. So shout out to them. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to sort of, turn the page a little bit and talk about women's sports with Adam Barlow. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona. All right, good morning. Welcome back. Girls just want to have fun. We just want to play the game. And fortunately, there is more opportunity than ever before for women to play the game. Now, here when we talk about football, we talk about pigskin football. But when you talk about football internationally, it's a much different game. So we're going to talk about women in sports and the WWF show with Adam Barlow. Very, very excited to have our international correspondent join us this morning. Adam, thanks so much.
No, thank you for having me, Sharona. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you're well.
Now tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about the WWF show.
Yeah, sure. Well, my name's Adam, and I live in Nottingham, which is kind of in the middle of England. It's about 2 hours from London. It's smack bang in the middle. I write for a magazine called Sports International, which focuses just on women's sport. We cover everything from women's cycling to women's rugby to cricket to soccer. Everything women's sport we cover, basically. And 2 years ago, myself and my co-host, Patty, who's based out in Los Angeles, we set up the Women's World Football Show podcast, which aims to cover women's soccer from all around the world. And it's grown over the 2 years, and we have correspondents now in Australia and Germany and Mexico, and we just try and give the women's game as much publicity as we can.
I got on the website last night in preparation for this show and spent literally hours on there. I'm amazed at how, and by the way, the hashtag Grow the Game, I love that. But some really big names have been on that show. Talk a little bit about what it's meant, not just for for the show itself, but for the women's game to have that kind of exposure.
It's been a great help because women's soccer seasons do tend to be quite short. So if we were just doing a show covering the American League, the NWSL, it wouldn't last the season. So it's great that mainstream media hasn't. Well, it's not, but mainstream media yet hasn't totally picked up on women's sports. So it allows independent companies such as ourselves to give these ladies the coverage that they deserve. And we've had people like Christine Sinclair on the show, Canada's record goal scorer, and Carly Lloyd, who scored a hat-trick for the United States in the World Cup final a couple of months ago.
I saw her, Julie Foudy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Julie Foudy. She's one of the famous 99ers from when the United States won the World Cup the previous time. I think she's a successful broadcaster now, isn't she? So
she is.
She was.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a great guest to have on. So, yeah, we get anybody and everybody kind of comes on the show.
Yeah, I was so impressed by the names on that list and some of the people that have been on that show. Let's talk a little bit about how different it is. And I know that you follow sports here in the United States as well. But for our audience out there, what is, from your perspective, what is the difference between football here and football in England?
I've been to America a couple of times watching sports, but the first thing that strikes you in America, the fans of each team are all mixed in together most of the time, aren't they? I was at the Los Angeles Angels versus Boston Red Sox at baseball, and there was like two sets of fans happily sitting next to each other. Whereas in England, if you say have Manchester United playing Liverpool, there'll be a section of the stadium where all the Liverpool supporters sit, and there'll be a section where all the Manchester United supporters sit. So that's one of the big differences, yeah.
So it's a little bit more segregated in terms of where fans sit and all of that.
Yes, yeah, you kind of sit with your own. I mean, the home team has maybe 85% of the stadium, but they have to give so many tickets to the visiting club, and that's kind of standard in England. Another thing is we don't play the national anthem unless it's an international game. So if it's like England versus France, you'll have if it's say England are taking on France, you'll have like the Marseillaise, the French anthem, and then you'll have God Save the Queen. Whereas if it's just like a club game, there's no anthems or anything like that. So that was really interesting, because even like high school games and things in America, you have the anthem, don't you?
But do they play music though?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, if somebody scores a goal, there's like a few blasts of music and stuff. But it's tough. In America, you've got baseball and football. You've got like breaks in play, haven't you? So you can play the music and stuff. Whereas over here in like soccer and rugby, you only have the half-time break for that, so you don't get as much music and things in the stadium.
I got you. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between soccer and rugby here in a minute. But since you mentioned coming to the United States, it sounds like you attended some baseball games. Did you attend a football game here?
No, I've not had the pleasure of doing that. I've done I was in the press box at Wembley for when the Dallas Cowboys played the Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, yeah? And I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, so I was a fan. I went 2 years ago when the Steelers got absolutely annihilated by the Vikings. But I've done baseball games in Pittsburgh and in Los Angeles, and I've seen the LA Galaxy.
I was just getting ready to ask you, because our first London game is this weekend. I was just getting ready to ask you if you'd had an opportunity to see a game there. Yes,
they sell out really quickly. I mean, tickets normally go on sale in like November, December time. And the season tickets pretty much go by the start of January, and then you're down to the individual games. But they always sell out, and it's always a fantastic atmosphere, because you don't just get supporters of the two franchises that are playing. You'll see jerseys from all 32 sides and college teams and everything. It's kind of like a celebration of the NFL as opposed to just the two teams that are playing. I don't know, but I've heard that it's one of the best regular season atmospheres that you'll have in the NFL. But, it's one big party basically.
Yeah, there's really a push right now. The NFL wants to. There's a lot of talk that they want to put a team in possibly London, overseas, in England. The NFL Europe experience wasn't a huge success, but they seem to think that the timing is right. Do you think that London is ready to support an NFL team?
I think it would definitely sell out. Whether the logistics are ready, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I don't know how you just add one team. You maybe have to add another one in the US, so you keep an even number. But I think before that happens, you'll probably see them one year just trying to have 8 NFL games in England, just to see how that goes. So you'll have an NFL game each week. And I think if that sells out, because they are slowly increasing the number of games. I think it's up to 3 now. it's probably going to go to 4 in a season or two's time. So I think that's the way they will go. And then I think it's at least 5 or 6 years away. But the potential is certainly there. But I think you'd have to do some. I mean, they would probably have a base in the US. They would probably play 3 or 4 weeks on the road, then 3 or 4 games at home. But it would be hard to schedule, especially if they're playing like the West Coast teams.
Yeah, I think the logistics are really the big stumbling block right now. I would completely agree with that. And, also the difference between, how things are done legally here and how they're done legally in England. There's some similarities in the legal system and in contracts and things of that nature, but there are definitely some differences as well, and they would have to reconcile those things too, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a long way to go with it, and you only really hear about this story in the UK in the week around the Wembley game. It's not like a rumbling story, so I still think it's a minimum of 5 years away, if not longer, to be honest.
So let's talk a little bit about the real football, right? Soccer versus rugby, and I know that you're far more experienced about this than I am, but I had a chance to watch some rugby games this summer. I covered the United Nations had an event here, their Youth Sports Summit, and so I had an opportunity to watch rugby, not just guys, but the women playing rugby, and I was impressed. It's a tough sport.
It's very hard. The big joke over here is that if you're really hard and macho, rugby is the sport to play because, you watch soccer and they're diving around all over the place and pretending to be injured, whereas rugby's kind of, I suppose rugby's got in our kind of sporting sphere like what hockey is in the US. It's the hardest physical sport there is. And you're right, it's so fast-paced and the power that the guys are hitting into each other, they really don't hold back. It certainly is a brutal sport to play.
Yeah, it definitely is. Is rugby as popular as I imagine it is overseas?
It is. In England, there's 2 types of rugby. You've got it's quite complex, but you have rugby league, which is played in the north of the country traditionally, and rugby union, which is the bigger of the 2 brands. Rugby union's the one that has 15 players a side, and it's the current World Cup that's going off. But traditionally, rugby's been seen as the middle class kind of sport. Played in like the more affluent areas of the country, but that is changing now. But that's the main difference. Rugby tends to be a more middle class game. Fans tend to be better well behaved. I mean, you can in the soccer stadiums over here, you can't actually have a drink while you're watching the game, but you can in rugby and stuff. Rugby is known as the gentleman's sport over here, which is quite crazy considering how brutal it is.
It is very brutal. If I wanted to say pick a team, a women's rugby team in England that I wanted to follow, what are some of the better teams and the bigger names?
Wasps, they're one of the better teams in the female game. Leicester Tigers, I believe they have a successful women's team as well. But a lot of the women's teams tend to play like sevens, which is like 7 players in a side. But the top international team, England, won the Women's World Cup. I think it was 2 years ago. I think they beat Australia. I think it was in the final. Don't quote me on that. But yes, there's at the club level, it's probably Wasps, and at international level, England are the current world champions.
All right, let's talk some soccer. The United States women's national team, how amazing were they, and such a fantastic story. Are they as big overseas as they are here?
They are. They're everybody's second favourite team, if you know what I mean. Everybody loves to see the US play. Yeah, I think it's just because they've always had a good stream of players. They played a friendly match in England back in February. It was a really good crowd, and there was a lot of US fans. And I think it's just down the years they've had so many fantastic players, haven't they? You think back to, you said the likes of Julie Fowley and Christine Rampone, who's currently playing, and Brandy Chastain, who's scored that famous goal against China when they won it. And yeah, they're a huge draw. They're like they're kind of like what Brazil are in men's soccer, or it's or kind of what the Dallas Cowboys are in American football. They really are big news wherever they go, and they've got millions of fans all around the world.
Soccer is really growing in the United States, and we're seeing a growth of not just women's soccer, but of soccer in general, but particular about women's soccer. What do you think that the United States could do to the women's team is tremendously popular, but I think that they could still be more popular yet. What do you think that we could do to make that happen?
Well, the Women's League in America is just it's final. They're playing the final actually this Thursday night in Portland, and that's on, I believe, Fox Sports 1 or one of the Fox channels. So that's going to be big. It's actually now got onto mainstream television. I think it has got a lot better in these last 2 years because people are kind of waking up to how good this United States team is. And I think on the back of them winning the World Cup, I think you're going to see interest go through the roof. I mean, they played a friendly at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh against Costa Rica, and there was over 44,000 people there watching it. So people are watching these games. I think it's a case of keep steadily on this path. And we've got the Olympics, of course, coming up next year. So that'll be another huge attempt for the team. So I think they're on the right track. I don't think it's always going to be a slow process with women's sport. It's always going to struggle to be as popular as the men's. But as long as it's financially stable, which it looks like it is, and you've got a good product, which they have with the United States team, I think it's on the right path.
You mentioned this, and I definitely wanted to find out. I'm very, very much a casual fan of the game. You mentioned the friendly games and versus I suppose the non-friendly. What does that mean?
A friendly match basically is it's like in the World Cup. Every match means something, but if the United States women's team want to practice and get ready for the World Cup, they have to kind of organise a game against another country. It's a bit like in the NFL, you have 4 preseason games, don't you, to try new things out. So that's what a friendly is. I mean, the US came over to England in February. Maybe next year England will repay the trip and go over to the United States kind of thing. So it's a way it's better than training amongst yourselves. You're playing against different opponents. And also you're playing in different countries because obviously the World Cup rotates round. I mean, the next World Cup's going to be in France. So you might see more teams wanting to play in European conditions and testing themselves like that. So that's all a friendly is. It's a non-competition match.
Yeah, because I'm on your website and I'm looking. The USA is playing Brazil, and it's denoted as friendly. That's on October the 21st at CenturyLink Field in Seattle. By the way, Seattle is one of the most popular. Obviously, the Seahawks are popular, but their soccer team is lights out. They really do support their soccer there.
It's funny you should mention Seattle. The Seattle Reign, to the women's team, they finished top of the league, so they get like the Supporters' Shield, and they are going to be taking on the FC Kansas City in the final on Thursday night in Portland. So
I see that.
You are right. Yeah. Seattle is a huge hotbed of soccer, and Seattle have the chance to win their first championship on Thursday night.
Yeah, you mentioned that Thursday night game. What are you interested to see, and what do you think will be the key if Kansas City does want to knock off Seattle? What do you think they need to do?
Well, this is a repeat of last year's final, but the difference is last year's final was in Seattle, and Kansas City went in and beat Seattle on their own home turf, which was a bit of a shock. I think if Kansas City are going to do it again, then they have to shut down the midfield. They've got Kansas City have got the Seattle Reign have got Jess Fishlock and Kim Little in the midfield who can do some real damage, and of course Megan Rapinoe, who's a big star in that United States team. So I do slightly favour Seattle for it. I think coming so close last time around and just losing out will really motivate them and fire them up. So I think you'll see a close game, and I think Seattle will just take it out 2-1, I think.
You mentioned the World Cup. What teams do you think? Give us a little preview of that. Who do you think is going to be the favorites, and who might be some sleepers?
Well, I think the World Cup's a while away, but the Olympics is the big one next summer, And the Olympics, I think the United States will be one of the favourites for it. They always are. They're one of the biggest teams. Germany, they disappointed at the World Cup, I thought, Germany. I thought they would do a little bit better than what they did. But if you're looking for a sleeper, I think Brazil on home territory. I mean, they have Martha, who is one of the best players in the world. Brazil. There's going to be huge pressure on Brazil. So I think they've never really won a major tournament of this stature. So I think Brazil could well be the sleeper team, but it's going to take a very, very good team to beat the United States.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I meant to say Olympics and I said World Cup because my brain's not functioning this morning. All right, so I mentioned I was playing around on the website last night, and I have to ask you, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your home county and England in general. But we all want to know about Barry the Beaver. Where did Barry the Beaver come from, and why is he so famous?
Well, my first visit to the United States, my best friend took me up to Niagara Falls, and we went over because the falls. We stayed in Buffalo, had a couple of nights in Buffalo, then went over to the fall to see the falls from the Canadian side because apparently it's a better view from there. And you know what it's like when you're a tourist. You try and buy any old stuff, and we went into this souvenir shop, and there was this really great big container full of these little cuddly beavers. So me being the British tourist aboard, I thought I've got to get something Canadian. And what can be more Canadian than a little cuddly beaver? So I picked him up, and he comes with me everywhere I go when I'm covering games in the press boxes and stuff. And when Patty and I set up the show, obviously the Canadian women's soccer team scene is quite big, so a lot of them play in the US. So we have a lot of listeners from Canada, but we didn't really have a Canadian host. So we kind of got Barry in as our host, and he was on the first ever show with us, and he just kind of carries in. He has his own Twitter account, and he's got over 100 followers, which isn't bad for a little cuddly beaver, is it? Yeah.
I'm definitely going to follow Barry the Beaver. You mentioned the show. I definitely want to ask you about your home country, but for our listeners out there, your show is bi-weekly, as I understand. How can they catch it? Where can they follow it on social media, and how could they listen to it?
So, if you go to the website, it's www.show.com. All our past shows from the past 2 years are up there, including a link telling you all about the shows. We are on Twitter at WWF Show, and also Facebook and Instagram. Again, the same WWF Show.
Yeah, it's called the Women's World Football Show. The website is fantastic. It's got important dates. It's got links. It has names that you should know, and if you're not familiar, that you can become familiar with. So definitely check that out. One of the things that is on my bucket list is to come to England, and I wasn't exactly sure how to pronounce Nottinghamshire. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, that's correct. That's how my friends pronounce it. So yeah, Nottinghamshire. That's correct.
Okay. So what if I'm able to someday swing that and make it over there? What should I be? Obviously, London is big, and you should visit London. But what other areas of interest are there in England? Well,
I'll just give Nottingham a quick plug. We have Sherwood Forest, which is where Robin Hood, obviously the legend of Robin Hood, so there's an attraction for that. Nottingham, the city itself, has the oldest pub in England, which was first opened 1100 something or other. So it's a long time. People flock all over the world just so they can say they've been to the oldest pub in England. So there's that, and with Nottingham it has ice hockey as well. We've got our ice hockey league is pretty low down in the ice hockey world, but we have the ice hockey, and there's 2 soccer teams and a very good cricket team. So if you're a sports nut, I would seriously suggest Nottingham. Apart from that, you've got Stonehenge, which is obviously quite famous with all the druids and everything like that. But yeah, there's lots of stuff.
And Wales is an area that I've always been fascinated with, because I like, I love water, I love coastal stuff, and so that's an area that I've always sort of been fascinated about. You mentioned cricket. I know nothing about cricket. That is definitely a sport that I need to get more knowledgeable about. If you had to, what is the most popular sport in England?
Oh, it's without a doubt, soccer is the most popular sport for both men and women. And then after that, it's kind of equal between cricket and rugby, I would say. But yeah, it's tough. Some people prefer cricket, some people prefer rugby, but soccer is by far away the most popular participating and spectator sport.
Well, that does not surprise me at all. Definitely, soccer is king internationally. I know the NFL would love to take, are you going to be at the game this weekend, by the way?
I'm not going this weekend, no, I'm afraid. I saved my money up for visiting America earlier this year, so that's where all that went. But it is on television here, so I shall be watching it on TV.
How did you become a Pittsburgh Steelers fan?
Basically, one of my best friends in America, she lives in Pittsburgh, so she's kind of like got me roped into all the Pittsburgh teams, so Steelers, Penguins, Pirates. I kind of follow the Steelers and the Pirates more than I do the Penguins, but yeah. So
do you follow any
other?
Do you follow any other sports that we do here in the States, like basketball or anything else?
I suppose I'm really trying. I mean, I enjoyed your previous segment. I'm really trying to get into college football because that really is tough for me. How the teams are all ranked in so many different conferences.
Mm-hmm.
It's a minefield. So I am trying with that. But basketball-wise, when I was in LA, I went to watch the LA Sparks in the Women's National Basketball League. So
yeah.
That was fun. Mm-hmm. They play at the same arena that the Lakers and the Clippers do. So I kind of look out for the Sparks. Mm-hmm. I mean. Yeah, they had a bad season last time around, but
definitely college football is something that I would highly recommend that you, if you have the time, that you get involved with, because it does have and the NFL has its rivalries, but with realignment and free agency and whatnot, it doesn't have the same feel to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
The rivalries and the long time aspect of what college teams do and what they mean, and it really is, and it's like that in basketball too, in a way, but it really is unparalleled, and there's nothing like college football.
No, those Army v Navy games at college football, they look something special, don't they? And Notre Dame looks, I heard you talk about Notre Dame, that looks a fantastic place to watch a game as well.
Yeah, and, in terms of the WNBA, I follow the NBA, and I always vow to do a little bit better about women's basketball, but it really is, in a lot of ways, the purest form of basketball, and the women's game is really fun to watch because it's about teamwork and it is about the beauty of the sport.
Yeah, and the game I saw, they were playing the Atlanta Dreamer, it was funny because it was the bottom of the East versus the bottom of the West kind of thing, but there was none of the trash talking and pointing and all that kind of thing. It, as you say, it was purely about basketball, and it was, and I mean, the Dream won in the last few seconds, but it was like back and forth all games, so it was really exciting. My first ever basketball game that was, so I kind of like started following the Clippers just because kind of thing, because the jerseys were cheaper in the shop, so that's why I bought a Clippers one, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm a Spurs fan, and we're getting ready to talk about the National Basketball Association and the San Antonio Spurs and what's going to happen in college hoops. So very excited about that. But, Adam, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Before you get out of here, tell everybody once again where they can find the show, where they can follow you guys on social media.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Sharona. I do listen to your show regularly, and it's an absolute honour to be here chatting with you. Just for the show, it's at hashtag WWF show, capital letters WWF, and the website is wwfshow.com. But you have a great show, and thank you for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, Well, thank you for the kind words. It was an honor to have you. I hope that you have a great day, and I hope that you'll come back on soon.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Nick Simmons, I know Nick is going to tell me how great Tim Duncan is and how my Spurs are going to do that thing again. So stay tuned in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona.
Thanks a lot for that, Sharona. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Big pimpin', baby. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Back Talk with Sharona. I am your host. My name is Sharona. Shout out to Aaron Nagler, Emery Hunt, and to Adam Barlow for joining me in the first three segments. Once again, mention we are partnered now with Ultimate Sports Talk. You can also catch our shows over on ultimatesportstalk.com. Very happy to partner up with them. So check out their website. They're a great source for sports news and other and sports podcasting. But we're going to talk some NBA and some college hoops now with Nick Simmons. Nick knows that I am definitely not the NBA expert. That is Vasti, who knows far more about NBA and college hoops than I do, although I am a fan. So thanks to Nick for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Well, I do appreciate it. It's really a good time to get up to speed on NBA action and college hoops because they're right around the corner. Training camps have started, so there's a lot to talk about. Let's start with it's really, really sad news about Derrick Rose. That guy cannot catch a break.
No, he can. Between lawsuits and injuries and dumb comments, he's keeps himself in the news.
Yeah, I've tried to avoid the opposite. That is a weird situation. There's no question at all about that. But he took an elbow to the face. He's going to have surgery. It really, the talent was there, but he just cannot stay healthy to save his life. It really is sad.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he's missed 212 games in the last 4 years. After that MVP season, everybody had high hopes for him and his career, and it's just all going downhill from then.
Now, there was a player, and I forget, I know that you'll probably remember, but there was an NBA player that had an orbital, or maybe it was a nose, and he played with a face guard. Who was that?
Richard Hamilton.
Okay. Do you think we'll see that from Rose?
I think he'll be all right just because, this is his first break there. Hamilton, he broken his nose about 3 or 4 times, and they told him he had to play with that, or the next time he broke it, he'd be done. So he had no choice. But Derrick Rose is his first injury there, so he may be all right without one. He may start the season with one. I saw that they're hopeful that he's going to begin the regular season this year and play in the first game. So he may start the season off with one, but other than that, I think he'll be okay.
Oh, well, that's good news. It's definitely good news. This show is a little bit about playing catch up a little bit over what's happened course of the past month. Do you remember September is kind of the theme? There were some interesting things that happened during the off season. Tristan Thompson and the Cavs, Anthony Bennett. Do you think that Anthony Bennett made the right decision?
Well, I think it was more so, I guess, of a mutual decision for him and the Timberwolves. I think the Raptors. That might be an all right place for him. They may have a role for him there, but I think the Cavs and the Timberwolves, I think they kind of maybe gave up on him too early. This is only his 3rd season. He hasn't looked that great when he's been on the court, but he's a first round pick. I mean, he's still growing into his game. He only played 1 year of college, so I mean, there were growing pains to be expected. But I think Toronto, that may be a good start for him. I believe he is Canadian, so it's kind of maybe going home for him. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of love out there right now as you're jumping around across several different NBA websites. A lot of love for Brad Stevens, a great college coach who's, maybe going to take the Celtics to the big league. Do you think that the Celtics are about to enter another golden period, so to speak?
Not as of today, no. Brad Stevens is a great coach. Last year, I believe they were 40-42. They made the playoffs. They got swept by Cleveland. But, I mean, the problem lies within their roster. They have 7 power forwards on the roster. I mean, that's a problem in itself. And Danny Ainge, he's done a good job, collecting assets and getting young players in. But at some point, he's got to look to either flip those assets or hit on his draft pick where he gets a franchise-type player. And so not this season, but next season, I believe they're going to be like maybe 50 or 60 million under the projected cap. They only have about 25 million that's on the books for 16-17. So, I mean, I'm looking for them this season to either make some type of trade to get that franchise player they haven't been able to sign, or I just don't know where else they could go from here. But they have some nice young talent, but it's just they have Brad Stevens, but they need that building block for the franchise. They just don't have it. I love Isaiah Thomas though. I think he's going to be a great player there, and the addition of David Lee is also big time for them. They'll have him and Kelly Olynyk down low with Isaiah on the perimeter with Evan Turner. So I mean they got some pieces, but I don't know. I think they may even take a step back this year because a couple of teams in the East got a little bit better.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some college players that might possibly help the Celtics later on in the show. But training camps are opening. What should people be on the lookout for? What teams are possibly going to step it up? And so many teams like the Hawks. Can the Hawks do what they did last year? And are the Golden State Warriors are they still going to be good? Give us a training camp preview.
Oh, yeah, the Warriors, they're still going to be good. I don't see them taking any steps back. If they could get it better, I mean, I know that's scary for the rest of the league, but they might actually be better. I know they lose David Lee, but, I mean, they used him marginally anyway. So of course, they're looking good out there. You have the Spurs. Like, I mean, I don't understand how everybody lets this happen. I mean, you get LaMarcus Aldridge, you get David West.
I mean, right?
It's just crazy. Ridiculous. They were already, arguably the second best team in the West. Now, adding LaMarcus Aldridge and David West. I mean, if they can stay healthy, if everybody stays healthy. And this year they'll get even more of a chance to rest guys, with the additions that they made. And, I mean, they just look really, really scary right now going into training camp.
The big thing that I'm curious about is how they're going to manage Tim Duncan's playing time. And we'll talk a little bit more about Tim Duncan. But before we do that, it's interesting to me because, back when LeBron went to the Heat and the Heat, they were doing what they were doing, people were complaining so much about them, quote unquote, cheating the salary cap. But you look at what the Spurs do, and they're that team that fly under the radar, but they do kind of the same thing.
Yeah, they kind of do, but it's like they do it, the right way. I guess the way that they have that organization set up. I mean, guys just want to go to play there because they know they're going to have a chance to win. I mean, you look at David West, he took about a $10 million pay cut to go play with the Spurs. I mean, that is just insane. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. They kind of do it that way, but they also, I mean, they build from within as well. So it's kind of hard to say. I mean, they're pretty much most of their franchise hasn't come from free agency. I mean, it's guys that they brought in through their own system. So,
right. Yeah, they've got. Of course, I'm biased. I completely admit it. I think that they've got the best system. I'm a big fan of Coach Pops, who, you know, he really does play the surly coaching guy to a T. He just, you know, he's something else, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, and just the way he manages guys and the way he puts his team first versus, you know, doing what's right for the league as far as sitting guys out and things like that, because he knows the ultimate goal is to win a championship. And I don't see Tim Duncan playing more than, you know, maybe 15 minutes a game in a regular season. I mean, he doesn't have to with the depth they have up front. Yeah,
I was just getting ready to ask you what you expected with the new additions. What can we expect from Tim Duncan? And I'm curious what your thoughts are. Where does Tim Duncan fit in the long list of NBA greats, in your opinion?
He's up there. I mean, there's so many guys you can name, but I mean, I don't look at him. I mean, I know a lot of people say he's the best power forward ever. I don't. In my eyes, he's a center, but he's definitely, you know, it's hard to say he's a top 10 player just because there's so many people. But I mean, he's arguably, you know, a top 10 all-time player. I mean, he's got 5 championships. He just does it so quietly, but he's always done the right thing. And I mean, he's a great leader on the floor. Off the court, he's great. I mean, it's hard to knock anything about, you know, Tim Duncan. I mean, he's just been that guy his whole career. You know, he reminds me a lot of, you know, what Dave Robinson was and what he stood for. You know, he basically kind of just took the torch and just kept going with it. But he's definitely, you know, one of the greatest NBA players of all time, and that's for sure. Top 10, top 15, however you want to put him in there. And that's only because, I mean, there's so many great players that have played the game.
Yeah, it really has been. I agree with that. And the discussion of is he a forward, is he a center, I sort of agree with you, Nick. But we don't have time to really get into all that. I definitely want to talk some college hoops. But before we do that, who do you think right now, I know it's way, way, way early, but who do you expect to be the studs and the duds of the NBA? And I want to get your thoughts on the Memphis Grizz.
Studs, you know, Anthony Davis and Steph Curry. I mean, I expect it to be a two-man race for MVP. I mean, LeBron's going to be LeBron, of course, but I just think that, you know, there may be some voter fatigue there, but I'd like to see Steph Curry keep his momentum going, you know. He's been trending up, you know, every season. He's just gotten better and better. But now I want to see him, you know, now he's at his peak, just stay there and, you know, keep on that pace that he's on and just continuing to win and play great. And Anthony Davis, I mean, he's got to get some better players around him. I think they'll be a lot better this year. I'm pretty sure they'll make the playoffs. And but
I mean, he just carried that team last year. He carried that team.
He did. I mean, just watching him and just the growth that he has, how versatile he is. Yeah, he's a great player to watch. He reminds me a lot of, you know, Tim Duncan. You know, he's quiet. He plays the game the right way. You know, you don't hear about him much in the media and nothing, you know, that's not positive. So he's, you know, he's a great player. He's going to be a great player to watch this year. I can't wait to see what he does this season.
I can't either.
The duds. I'm going to put. Only reason I'm going to put Derrick Rose in this category because I mean he can't stay healthy. I mean, and then the comments that he made, you know, about he can't wait to get the free agency in the next couple of years because, you know, there's so much money going around the NBA right now. He can't wait to get paid. I mean, that's kind of a slap in the face for, you know, the Chicago fans that, you know, continue to stick by him. But I mean, the guy just can't stay on the floor, and I feel bad for him. Another dud, J.R. Smith. I mean, he's been a dud basically his whole career. I hate to see him, be the way that he is because he's got so much talent. J.R. Smith could be a top 3 shooting guard in the league if he really wanted to. He can play defense. I mean, he can shoot. I mean, I know he's streaky sometimes, but I mean, he's crazy athletic, and just the game that he has, he's just not there mentally, and that's what kills his game. And then, him opting out this year, thinking that somebody would try to sign him, and nobody did, and then he had to come back to Cleveland. I mean, that just shows you right there, as much talent as he has, and nobody wants to put up with him. So, that's why he's a dud.
It's really sad. Are we ever going to see Joel Embiid play?
He is like Greg Oden 2.0. I mean, that guy.
I know, man.
And
crazy.
I warned everyone that, when he was coming out of Kansas, when he had the back issues, I'm like, do not draft this guy. There's no way I would touch this guy. He's 19 with a back problem and can't play in college. I mean, what do you think is going to happen as he gets older? It's only going to get worse. And now he's got the foot problem. So, I mean, at some point, I mean, he's got to play at some point. I hope that he gets healthy, but I mean, right now it's not looking good for him either. And I like what Philly's doing. They've been putting a good team together, so it'd be nice to see him on the floor with Okafor and the rest of those guys.
It really would. Has any NBA player missed their first 2 seasons and gone on to have a successful career?
I would have to say no. Not that I can think of off the top of my head, no.
I can't think of any. I can't think of any either. So you would think that the odds – I like him. You would think, though, that the odds are against him.
Oh, yeah, they definitely are. I mean, the injuries that he has, those aren't injuries that you just, okay, now you're healthy and now you can play. Those are the things that are going to linger. Back problems linger. That foot issue that he has is going to linger. I mean, and then being a big guy with those problems, it's only going to complicate things for him. Luckily, he's young. He's going to have plenty of opportunity. But I mean, we thought the same thing about Greg Oden as well, though.
Yeah, it really is sad. Before we turn to college hoops, the Memphis Grizzlies, I'm here in Tennessee, follow the Grizz. What are your projections for them? Are they going to, they're so close. They've been so close. What will they do this year?
Always like the Grizzlies. I like Zach Randolph and Gasol, but I have them in the. They should make the playoffs. I see them somewhere around 5th, 6th seed. I mean, they have a good team. They play defense. I like them because they play old school basketball. If this was, the 90s, the Grizzlies would be the team out of all the teams today that would definitely fit in because of their style of play. I think they still need, better guys on the wings, especially from a scoring aspect. I love Mike Conley. Tony Allen has to stay healthy. I mean, he's their best defender on the perimeter, and he went down last year, and that kind of derailed him for a little bit. But I mean, I see them in the same spot, but I can't. It's hard to say that I see them going any further than what they have until they, get better on the perimeter. I mean, down low, of course, they're probably the best in the league, but they need wing scorers in order to make the next jump. And then you got Randolph's getting up there in age, so I mean his window's starting to close. So I mean they're going to make a move. They need to do it now.
I agree. They have to get better at scoring. It's definitely been their Achilles heels. Before we turn to college hoops, Bleacher Report just ranked the 30 NBA head coaches. Did you agree with their rankings?
I thought it wasn't too far off. I thought Quinn Snyder at 12, that's the Utah Jazz coach, I thought that was kind of ridiculous, being that you have, guys like Flip Saunders and Byron Scott, and Lionel Hollins. I mean, they've all had success in the league. Mm-hmm. And to rank Quinn Snyder ahead of him, I thought that was pretty off base. But, I mean, you can't argue with the top five. I believe they had Doc Rivers and Mike Budenholzer with the Hawks, Steve Kerr, Rick Carlisle, and Popovich there. So, I mean, you can't argue with that top five. That's a monster top five of coaches. But I do like, I mean, like I said earlier, I like Stevens in Boston and Jason Kidd. I mean, Jason Kidd's done a hell of a job with Milwaukee, and he did a great job when he was in Brooklyn. And you could argue he did a great job in New York too when he was playing that last season when they won 50-plus games. I mean, he was pretty much a de facto coach there. So.
Don't
so, I mean, it
started
wasn't
about Jason Kidd and what happened to him. That was awful.
But it wasn't too off base. They did a good job with it.
I agree. The top five, that is the list. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about college hoops. We just talked about Texas. I want to get your preview, but we just talked about Texas in terms of college football. I want to ask you about Shaka Smart. What's he going to do? Is he safe? And how do you think that's going to go?
They just got rid of their AD there in Texas. Yeah. I think Shaka's going to be fine for now. I mean, he's basically the best coach they could have gotten anyway. I can't see them looking to replace him with anyone, when he hasn't, played a game yet. So I think it's going to be a good situation for him. I mean, he's a great X's and O's guy, and now he's going to have a chance to actually get talent that, can back up, what he can do as a coach. So I think Texas is going to be a good spot for him. But I don't see them, trying to get rid of him at any time soon, or a new AD coming in and wanting their own guy, because I mean, there's not much out there that they could get that's any better than what he's going to be able to provide for him. And he's young, so and that's another good thing. So and he's not going to leave. I mean, he just got to Texas. He's not going to. I mean, where's he going to go? Where would he? If he wanted to actually go somewhere, where else would it be? So, I like the fit. I mean, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for Texas and for Shaka.
Yeah, I thought that there were some reports out there that maybe he might not be safe. I thought that was kind of curious too. But with Texas is in. It's always an interesting state anyway, and so we'll see what happens with them. We talked about Charlie Strong. I want to ask you, Kentucky, I think they lost 7 players to the NBA. They typically do reload. Are they going to be good this year, and what do you think they'll do?
Yeah, they're going to be good. I've seen, I've heard some analysts say that, they may have a chance to go 40-0, but I mean, I think that's a little far-fetched. I think they're going to take a step back, but I mean, they have a monster recruiting class coming in, as well as the usual suspect Duke. They lost a lot of guys, but I mean, the guys they have coming in are just world beaters. But I mean, me personally, I like Carolina and I like Maryland as the top 2 teams. Yeah, I mean, Melo Trimble in Maryland, I mean, he's outstanding. I mean, he's 6'3", plays point guard. He can do it all. I mean, he's a great leader on that team. This is the best Maryland team they've had since they won in, I believe it was 2002 with Juan Dixon and Steve Blake. This team might be better than that one. So I think Maryland's going to be a team to watch for. And then Carolina, I mean, they have everybody coming back except for J.P. Tokoto, which, I mean, that's going to hurt them on the defensive end. But, I mean, they have Theo Pinson who can play defense on the perimeter. So, I mean, I don't see them missing a beat. They have experience, guys like Marcus Page, Bryce Johnson. I mean, just being able to – in college basketball, I mean, it's a game of either you have to have, those McDonald's All-American guys that are going to come in and just, tear it up as soon as they start playing, or you're going to have an experienced team. And I think that's what Carolina has right now. They have the most experience out of anybody in the NCAA this year. And they weren't far off last year, so, I mean, I expect them to have a great season. The other team.
There are a lot of
of
people that think this is Roy Williams' best team. Do you think that that's true?
It's not close to his best team. It's maybe the best one he has for a while with the sanctions and everything that Carolina might have coming. But no, this isn't his best team. I think the team that didn't win the championship that had when Kendall Marshall went down, I believe that was 2011 with Harrison Barnes and Tyler Zeller. That team was better than this one, and that wasn't his best team.
Okay.
The 2005, I think, with Sean May and Rashard McCants and Raymond Felton, that was probably his best team that he's had at Carolina. But this is definitely going to be a good one. So I expect one of those four teams, along with Kansas, because they're returning a lot of starters too. So I expect one of those five teams will be cutting down the nets in March.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Larry Brown, and if we've got time, we'll talk about the new shot clock. The Larry Brown situation, obviously big news in college hoops. If Larry Brown were coaching, a Duke, of course he's not going to do that with Coach K, but hypothetically speaking, if he were coaching at a bigger, more money-producing school, would those sanctions have been as severe?
That's a great question. I'd have that's tough. I'd almost say no. I mean, but then you look at what happened to Syracuse, and I mean that was a bad situation they have to deal with as well. I mean, it's a sad situation because SMU he had the program. They were heading in the right direction. I mean, he's 75. I didn't see him coaching much longer anyway, but I think he was setting the program up, where when he left, they'd be in a good position. But now, you're losing 9 scholarships over the next 3 years. You got 3 years of probation, postseason ban for 3 years. I mean, nobody's going to want to take that job. So I could see him maybe, coaching out the next 3 years just because of the situation, and then retiring. But it's going to put SMU right back to where they were, off the map, off the radar.
Right. I know. They just had sort of recovered from the death penalty. I forget when that went down, but they. It really is sad. I mean, I hate it. I understand. I suppose we're very hypocritical though when it comes to these things. Everybody knows it goes on. Everybody, when it's someone else, I'll just say that, when it's someone else, we can maybe look another way, maybe looking at Louisville and Kentucky a little bit, but, right up the road here. I want to ask you, though, kind of another little bit of a story is the new shot clock. What do you think is going to be the impact of it?
I think it'll be good for the game as far as, especially for the fans watching the game, speeding it up a little bit. I think they needed that. 35 seconds was way too long. I know it's a 40-minute game, so it kind of make it different from what we see in the NBA. But I think that speeding up the game is going to add a little more excitement. It's going to cause teams that have to get in their offense a little quicker than what they normally would. But I think it's a good look for the game. I look for it to go down even lower, maybe in the next year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're going to eventually get to 24 seconds like the NBA is.
I like it. Nick, thanks so much for joining me again. I hope that you'll come back soon. Tell everybody out there where they can find you, find your website.
You can find me at www.thegiveandgo.com, and you can reach me on Twitter at Nick_Simmons with 2 M's _. So at Nick_Simmons _.
All right.
And thanks for having me on.
Really do appreciate it. Go Spurs, go.
I hear you. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, that's it for another episode of Bat Talk with Sharona. Thanks for tuning in. Shout out once again to my partnership with Ultimate Sports Talk. You can also find my show over there, www.ultimatesportstalk.com. We'll be back on Monday with another great show. We're going to be talking about the AFC East on Monday, the Dolphins, the Jets, the Patriots, and the Bills. So definitely stay tuned in for that. Check us out on Friday morning, Game Over with Vashti and Sharona. Happy Hump Day. Have a great day, and we will talk to you next week.